You see, we have been trained by this world to celebrate the self, to protect the self, to elevate the self. But the path to life, real life, begins when the self is brought low, when it is crushed, when it dies. Because you cannot serve two masters, you cannot seek truth while bowing to pride. You cannot walk in light while clinging to your own shadow. Some of you have prayed for change, you've cried out for purpose. But the answer has been the same since the beginning. Die to yourself, kill the ego, let it bleed, let it break, let it scream. Because until that voice is silenced, you will never hear the one that truly matters. The ego is not what most people think it is. It's not just confidence. It's not simply self-esteem. The ego is far more subtle, far more dangerous. It's the quiet voice in the back of your mind that tells you you're right, even when you're wrong. It's the whisper that tells you you're better than the next person. It's the wall you build to keep others out. Not to protect yourself, but to preserve an image. And it is that image, that illusion, that becomes your master. The ego doesn't walk into your life like a thief. It grows like a shadow, right behind you, always there. It develops when you're praised for being better than others. It feeds when you're admired. It becomes addicted to being seen, being validated, being told you're important. And over time, without even noticing it, you start to believe that what people say about you is who you actually are. Not the quiet moments, not the thoughts in the dark, not the flaws you try to hide. Just the praise, just the attention. That's the version of yourself the ego tells you to protect. But the ego lies. It always lies. It tells you that you have nothing to learn from others, that admitting fault makes you weak, that being vulnerable is dangerous. It says you must always be strong, always be right, always be in control. And so, you spend your life defending a version of yourself that doesn't even exist, fighting battles to protect an illusion. You start to measure your worth by the success you have over others, not the progress you've made within. You look outward for validation, forgetting that truth is found inward, where the noise dies and the mirror stands clear. The ego deceives you by making you think you're free when you're actually in chains. You think you're in control, but you're constantly reacting. You're quick to speak, slow to listen. You can't take criticism. You can't let anyone see you fail. You can't admit when you're wrong. Why? Because the ego tells you that to lose face is to lose value. So you perform, you pretend, you posture, and slowly you begin to live a double life. One on the outside that looks strong, confident, untouchable, and one on the inside that is tired, confused, and afraid. But the ego won't let you stop. It tells you that to stop would be to fall apart, and that's its most evil trick. It convinces you that it's protecting you, that it's keeping you alive, when in fact it's the very thing that's killing you. The ego wants to keep you blind, because once your eyes open, once you see clearly, you begin to realize that the strength you thought you had was just pride in disguise, that the image you built was a fragile mask, that the applause never filled the emptiness inside, and then you're left with the most terrifying truth of all. You never really knew who you were. This is why the ego must die, because as long as it lives, you can't grow. You'll resist correction, you'll reject accountability. You'll surround yourself with people who only echo your thoughts, never challenge them. And you'll live small, trapped inside the limits of your pride, afraid to change, afraid to admit that you don't have it all together, that you never did. The ego doesn't want you to be honest. It doesn't want you to apologize. It doesn't want you to ask for help, because to do that would be to admit need, and the ego thrives on the illusion of self-sufficiency. But what if you were never meant to be self-sufficient? What if the whole point was to walk in humility, to be teachable, to admit weakness so that grace could have room to work? The ego will fight that. It will scream at the idea of surrender. It will try to convince you that humility is humiliation, that obedience is oppression, that admitting fault is failure. But none of that is true. That's the ego talking. That's the deceiver. You see, the ego makes you think you're in competition with everyone, that life is a race and you need to win, that people are either beneath you or above you, but never beside you. It keeps you from true relationships, because real love can't grow in pride. Real community can't breathe where the ego is suffocating everything. So instead, you stay guarded, you stay isolated, and you wonder why nothing feels real anymore. The ego wants the spotlight but fears exposure. It wants applause but can't handle silence. It wants to be admired but doesn't want to be truly known, because to be known would be to reveal the cracks. And that's where the ego draws the line. It builds a life around image, not substance, around performance, not transformation. And eventually, it gets so good at pretending, you begin to fool even yourself. But deep down, you know something's off, that all your striving isn't bringing peace, that all your success still feels empty, that behind all the applause is a voice asking, is this it? That's not doubt. That's not weakness. That's clarity beginning to rise. That's the soul stirring, trying to wake you up, trying to remind you that the life you were meant for isn't one where you're always defending your pride, but one where you're walking in truth, even if that truth breaks you. And it will break you, because the ego can't be tamed. It must be killed, and that death will feel like losing everything. It will feel like the ground has been ripped out from under you. But what you'll find beneath the rubble isn't failure. It's freedom, because the ego has been deceiving you for far too long. And once it's gone, you'll finally be able to breathe. You'll finally be able to listen, to grow, to receive, and maybe for the first time, to truly live. We grow up being told that strength is about standing tall, never backing down, never showing weakness. We hear that strong people push through, take control, and never let anyone see them cry. And so, from an early age, we build walls. We armor up. We try to hold the world together with the sheer force of our will. We convince ourselves that surrender is failure, that letting go is weakness, and that true strength means always being in control. But if we're honest, that kind of strength, the one we think we need, eventually breaks us, because control is an illusion. You can work harder, plan more, speak louder, grip tighter, but at some point life will show you that you're not in charge. That no matter how much you fight, there are things that won't bend to your will. The people you love will change. Opportunities will fall apart. Your body will grow tired. The ground beneath you will shift. And all that effort to hold it all together won't be enough. You'll be exhausted, not because you're weak, but because you've been fighting the wrong battle. You've been trying to win a war by force that was never meant to be won that way. And this is where surrender begins, not in giving up, but in giving in. Not in apathy, but in trust. It's not the kind of surrender that comes from defeat, but the kind that comes from wisdom. The kind that says, I am not enough. And that's okay. The kind that stops wrestling to be seen, to be known, to be right, and starts resting in something greater, something deeper, something that isn't shaken when the world shakes, but surrender is terrifying. Because when you've lived your whole life being strong, surrender feels like falling. It feels like being exposed, unguarded, vulnerable, and vulnerability is uncomfortable. It invites risk. It means allowing others to see you without the mask. It means letting go of your own plans. It means acknowledging that you don't know everything, that you can't fix everything, that you're not the center of the universe. And everything in your ego will scream to resist that. Because the ego wants control. The ego thrives on certainty. The ego can't survive in surrender, but your soul can. In fact, it was made for it. There is a strength that doesn't come from the muscles or the mind. It doesn't come from dominance or status. It's the strength that shows up in silence when you no longer need to defend yourself. It's the strength that says, I don't have to prove anything anymore. It's the strength to forgive when you've been wronged, to ask for help when you're drowning, to admit when you're wrong, to release what you cannot carry anymore. That's a strength that isn't natural. It's supernatural because it doesn't come from you. It comes through you when you finally stop trying to be your own savior. The world won't understand that kind of strength. It will laugh at it. It will call it naive, but the strongest people you will ever meet are not the ones who talk the loudest. They're the ones who carry quiet peace in the middle of storms. They're the ones who don't need to win every argument because they're not ruled by their pride. They don't need the spotlight because they know who they are in the dark. They have let go of the need to control everything, and in doing so, have found a power that control could never offer. You see, surrender doesn't mean you stop trying. It means you stop trying to do it all alone. It means you stop carrying weight that was never yours to carry. It means you stop bowing to the expectations of the world and start walking in the truth of who you were made to be. It means you trust that even when things fall apart, you are not abandoned. That even when life doesn't go your way, you are not without purpose. That even when you are weak, you are not without worth. That kind of surrender is costly. It requires letting go of your pride. It requires confronting your fears. It requires silence, real silence, where you stop talking and start listening. It requires a breaking, not to destroy you, but to rebuild you. Because some things in you need to break, the illusions, the lies, the false strength, they need to be shattered so that something true can rise from the ashes. And when it does, you'll begin to understand what real strength looks like. It's not loud, it's not polished, it's not perfect. It's the kind of strength that stays kind in the face of cruelty, that stays steady in the middle of chaos, that holds on when there's nothing left to hold but faith. That wakes up every morning not with arrogance, but with gratitude, not with a need to control, but with a willingness to follow. Surrender is not weakness. It is strength in its purest form. It is the strength to stop pretending. The strength to let go of the script and embrace the truth. The strength to kneel instead of climb. The strength to say, I don't know, but I trust. That kind of strength won't always make sense to the world, but it will bring you peace, and peace is more powerful than pride ever will be. We live in a world that praises independence. From the time we're young, we're told to stand on our own 2 feet, figure it out ourselves, and never show need. We're taught that the highest goal is to be self-made, to be strong enough to not depend on anyone, to have all the answers, make all the moves, and never ask for help. And if you can pull it off, if you can build your life with your own 2 hands, rise to the top by your own power, then you're a success. That's what they say. But what they don't say is that self-sufficiency is an illusion. A beautiful, destructive illusion. It looks good on the outside. It wears nice suits, drives impressive cars, keeps a schedule full of achievements. It walks into rooms with confidence, answers questions without hesitation, and always seems like it's got everything under control. But on the inside, it's hollow, it's anxious, it's afraid, because when you build your life on the belief that you're all you've got, you live every day knowing that if you break, there's no one coming to save you. That's not strength, that's fear wrapped in pride, the illusion of self-sufficiency is that you are your own foundation, that you don't need anyone, that everything you have you earned, that the ground under your feet is stable because you laid it. But what happens when the storm comes? What happens when the job falls through? When the relationship ends? When your body gives out? When the silence becomes too loud and the pressure too much? What happens when your strength isn't enough? Because eventually it won't be. No matter how much you try to outrun it, life will corner you. Pain will come, loss will come, uncertainty will come, and it won't knock on your door, it'll break it down. And in that moment, your resume won't matter, your followers won't matter, your bank account won't matter. All that will matter is whether or not you built your life on something real, or if you spent it performing a version of strength that was never yours to carry. The problem with self-sufficiency is not that it's wrong to be responsible, or to grow, or to take initiative. The problem is that it tells you that you are the source, that everything begins and ends with you, that if you fall, everything else falls with you, that if you don't have the answers, then you've failed, that needing someone else, needing something greater, is weakness, but that's not weakness, that's honesty. And most people are terrified of being honest. They'd rather fake strength than admit need. They'd rather live tired, overworked, and burdened than open up and say, I can't do this alone. But you weren't meant to do this alone. You weren't designed to be your own savior. You were never created to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, and yet the illusion of Sufficiency will keep you in that cycle, pushing you harder, demanding more, until you run out of fuel and crash. And then, even in the wreckage, pride will whisper, "Get up. Don't let them see you like this. Keep going. You're fine." And that's how people burn out. That's how they fall apart in silence, because they've believed the lie that needing help is failure. That surrender is for the weak. That admitting "I can't" is the same as saying "I'm not enough." But what if being not enough is the point? What if you were never supposed to be enough by yourself? What if the illusion is keeping you from the very thing that could heal you, could lift you, could carry you when you can't carry yourself? The most dangerous part about believing in self-sufficiency is that it makes you blind to your own limits. It tells you to keep pushing when you should be pausing. It tells you to hide your wounds instead of healing them. It tells you to fight battles that aren't even yours to fight, and it keeps you disconnected from people, from purpose, from peace. You start to isolate yourself because admitting need feels like a risk. You start to control every detail of your life because uncertainty feels like weakness. You start to close yourself off emotionally because being seen feels unsafe. And little by little, self-sufficiency becomes a prison. It's a cold, lonely cell where you sit at the center of everything, exhausted and empty, but still pretending like you're fine. Still convincing everyone else, and maybe even yourself, that you've got this. That you don't need help, that you're strong, but deep down you know. You know you're tired. You know you're scared. You know that if one more thing goes wrong, you might fall apart. That's not what life was meant to be. There is a deeper kind of strength, one that doesn't begin with self, one that begins with letting go, with admitting, "I can't do this on my own," with realizing that your worth isn't tied to your performance, that you don't have to carry every burden alone, that asking for help, leaning on others, depending on something beyond yourself, that's not weakness, that's wisdom. That's where real strength begins. Because it's only when you stop trying to be your own source that you can finally be filled. It's only when you stop pretending that you're enough that you can finally be made whole. But the illusion will fight you. It will tell you to keep pretending, to keep pushing, to keep managing, controlling, fixing. But listen closely. There's a voice underneath the noise. A quiet voice that says, "You were never meant to do this by yourself." And when you finally stop, when you finally listen, when you finally let go of the illusion and reach for something greater, you'll begin to feel it. Peace, freedom, rest, not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer have to be. Transformation isn't a surface change. It's not a new habit, a better routine, or a fresh start in the way most people think. Transformation is not about polishing up who you already are. It's about becoming someone entirely new. And that's not something that happens through comfort or convenience. It happens through death. Real transformation begins with the end of something, the death of who you were, the death of what you thought you needed, the death of the version of yourself that kept you from becoming who you were created to be. That's a hard truth for most people to swallow, because we like the idea of growth. We like the idea of progress, of breakthrough, of change. But we don't like the cost. We don't like the tearing down part. We want to skip the pain and get to the result. We want the resurrection without the grave, but it doesn't work that way. Because nothing truly changes until something truly dies. The parts of you that are rooted in pride, they don't just fade. They have to be torn out. The lies you've believed about yourself, they don't just gently release. They have to be confronted and destroyed. The behaviors that you've hidden behind, the defense mechanisms, the ego, the masks, they can't stay. If they stay, you stay the same, and you can't be transformed while still holding on to the very things that broke you in the first place. We want healing, but we don't want to bleed. We want freedom, but we don't want to lose control. We want purpose, but we don't want to give up comfort, and yet there's no shortcut to transformation. There's no bypass around brokenness. The only way out is through, and the only way through is death. The kind of death that breaks you open, that exposes every false thing you've built your life on, the kind of death that feels like the end, because it is. And yes, it hurts. It hurts to let go of what's familiar, even if what's familiar is killing you. It hurts to let the old version of you fall away, even if that version has only brought you emptiness and pain. But that pain isn't punishment. That death isn't cruelty. It's mercy, because it's the only path to life. It's the only way something new can be born. You can't carry old chains into a new life. They have to fall off. And sometimes the only way they fall off is when you fall to your knees and say, I can't do this anymore. There's something sacred in that breaking, in that moment where you have nothing left to prove, nowhere left to run, no more excuses to hide behind. That's where transformation begins, when your ego dies, when your plans die, when the image you've built dies. That's where something real can finally rise, and not just something better, but something new. A new way of seeing, a new way of thinking, a new heart, but that doesn't come cheap. You have to bury the old to make space for the new. Most people never get there. They get close. They feel the discomfort. They feel the pull, but when the heat rises, they run. When the walls start shaking, they back out. They patch up the cracks and go back to pretending, because dying to yourself feels like loss. But the truth is, it's not the end of you. It's the end of what was never truly you. It's the end of the version of you that was shaped by fear, by shame, by performance. It's the end of the lies, the end of the striving, the end of the pretending. And what rises in its place is not a stronger version of the mask, but the real you, the healed you, the whole you. But it requires surrender. That's the part no one likes to talk about. We want to grow, but we don't want to surrender. We want to evolve, but we want to stay in charge of the process. We want change, but we still want control. And so we sabotage our own transformation. We cling to our pride. We protect our wounds. We justify our behaviors. And we wonder why nothing ever feels different, because you can't hold onto your old self and expect to be made new. You can't have resurrection without crucifixion. Something has to die, and maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe something in you is already starting to die, the desire to keep up appearances, the need to always be right, the compulsion to control everything and everyone. Maybe it's unraveling. Maybe you're feeling the weight of the collapse. And maybe that's not the enemy working against you. Maybe that's grace. Maybe that's the invitation, not to hold on, but to let go, not to survive, but to surrender. Because when you die to yourself, truly die to yourself, what comes next isn't emptiness. It's clarity, it's peace, it's purpose, not manufactured, not earned, not performed, but given. You stop striving because there's nothing left to prove. You stop hiding because there's nothing left to protect. You stop fearing because the thing you feared most, losing yourself, has already happened, and you're still here, you're still breathing, and now, for the first time, you're ready to really live. That's what transformation costs. It costs your pride. It costs your illusion of control. It costs the comfort of the old, even when the old is broken. But what you gain in return is beyond measure. It's not just a better life. It's a new one. One that isn't driven by fear. One that isn't built on sand. One that can weather the storms because it's no longer about performance, but about presence, about truth, about freedom. And none of that comes until something in you dies. Nobody wants to be broken. We run from it. We hide it. We do everything we can to avoid the cracks, to patch them up, to pretend we're whole when deep down we know we're not. Because we've been taught that brokenness is failure, that it means we've lost, that something is wrong with us. We look around and see people who seem to have it all together, so we convince ourselves we should too. And when we don't, we cover it up with smiles, with busyness, with distractions. But here's the truth. Life's greatest victories don't begin with having it all together. They begin in brokenness, because brokenness does something to you that nothing else can. It strips away the lies. It brings you face to face with what you've been trying to avoid. It forces you to confront the things you buried under layers of ambition and noise and pride. It leaves you exposed, raw, and vulnerable, but also real. And in that place, something sacred happens. The walls you spent your whole life building begin to fall. The masks start to crack. The image you tried so hard to protect begins to fade, and what's left is the truth. The truth that you're not as strong as you pretended to be. The truth that you're tired, that you're scared, that you've been fighting a war inside yourself and losing. But the beauty of brokenness is that it opens the door to something you never would have found otherwise. Grace, mercy, restoration. When everything falls apart, when the pieces are scattered and nothing makes sense, you have a choice, to keep pretending or to surrender. And surrender is where the victory begins. It's upside down, it's backwards. It doesn't fit into the world's definition of success. But some of the most powerful moments in life are born in the middle of the mess. Not when you're standing tall, but when you're on your knees. Not when you've figured it all out, but when you're willing to admit you don't have the answers. That's where transformation begins. That's where healing starts, not in your strength, but in your weakness. Not in your control, but in your surrender. The people who are truly strong, truly grounded, truly at peace, they didn't get there by avoiding pain. They got there by walking through it. They let the fire refine them instead of destroy them. They let the breaking lead to building. They allowed their lowest moments to become the foundation for their greatest growth. Because brokenness, when embraced, doesn't end in defeat. It leads to victory. But not the kind of victory that puffs up the ego, the kind of victory that humbles you, that shapes you, that changes the way you see yourself and the way you see the world. See, when you've been broken, really broken, you stop looking at people the same way. You stop judging so quickly. You stop needing to be the loudest voice in the room. You develop empathy. You listen more. You understand pain in others because you've lived it yourself, and that kind of compassion. That kind of softness, that's strength, that's power, that's victory. But most people miss it because they're too busy trying to hold it all together. They think brokenness is something to escape, instead of something to walk through. They numb it, they run from it. They medicate it with busyness, with substances, with shallow relationships, with empty success. And all the while, the thing that could have been their turning point becomes another missed opportunity. Because the path to victory was never going to be paved in gold. It was always going to start in the dirt of grief, the dirt of failure, the dirt of disappointment, the dirt of shattered dreams and closed doors and unanswered prayers. But that dirt, that's where seeds grow, that's where roots take hold, that's where real lasting change begins, not when you're celebrated, but when you're crushed, not when you're applauded, but when you're overlooked. Because in those places, when no one's watching, when it's just you and the silence, you find out who you really are and who you're not. You realize how much you've depended on things that don't last, how much your identity was wrapped up in performance and image and approval. And when those things are stripped away, when all you're left with is the wreckage, it feels like death. But it's the beginning of life. Real life, life that's not built on illusion but on truth. Life that's not driven by ego but by purpose. Life that doesn't rise and fall with circumstances, but stands firm because it's been through the fire and come out stronger. That's why brokenness is a gift even when it doesn't feel like one. Because it wakes you up, it shakes you free, it reminds you of what really matters, it softens your heart, it deepens your soul, and most of all, it opens you up to receive the very thing you could never earn on your own, grace. That unearned, undeserved, overwhelming love that meets you not at your best, but at your worst. That picks you up when you have nothing left to give. That restores what was lost, redeems what was wasted, and rebuilds what was broken. But you only find it when you stop pretending, when you stop trying to impress, when you stop numbing the pain and start facing it. Because victory doesn't come from avoiding the battle. It comes from fighting through it. And sometimes the greatest fight is the one within, the fight to believe there's still hope, the fight to keep going when everything in you wants to quit, the fight to hold on when you feel like letting go. That's where the victory begins, in the dark, in the silence, in the breaking, and when it comes, it won't look like the world's version of winning. It won't come with trophies or applause, but it will come with peace, with joy, with freedom, and those things, they're worth every tear, every scar, every moment of brokenness that led you there.